talking shop, right?
We're talking shop.
Talkin Shop.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to our first episode of Talkin Shop. More of a casual conversation about anything that comes up, really. Like we each, wow, it's so organic. I'm even like coughing in the intro here. No editing here, right? No, I'm sure there's going to be editing, but less censoring. So we are talking shop, and it's. I'm really looking forward to this series. Is there something else I'm missing, John? What do we want to cover or intro into the talking shop?
Yeah, so maybe the genesis of how this was born, and then we'll kind of give everybody a quick intro of who we are. So the thought process is the lack of a forum to just have genuine, interesting conversation about the security industry, security technology, things that influence the industry, and have guys and we'll introduce our backgrounds and a little bit about us in a minute, just with diverse backgrounds, but what we have in common is a curiosity and an interest in the evolution of the security industry and maybe doing things different way. We do not, I think we'll note over time that we're not agreeable on everything. So we have kind of different backgrounds and different interests and take a different perspective on things. But I think that's what's going to make this a fun and interesting and engaging conversation, is how we're going to chop things up and have a conversation and just going to be talking shop.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a need out there for the market, right? If you look at any of the other content that's being produced out there, it's, like heavily sponsored and influenced by different manufacturers. And so this is nice that we can just talk shop together. And I'll kick it off with the intros. My name is Benji Bullock. You might know me as the Dork. I am proudly calling myself a dork because I'm obsessed with anything door hardware related. I have been in the industry since 2018, which I know doesn't seem like a long time, but I've got like one of those obsessive personalities. And when I dove into the industry, I dove deep, and I'm not digging myself out anytime soon. So I love door hardware, access control, and all of the security technology surrounding that. I'm definitely not as knowledgeable with cameras and like AI and stuff like that. So that's my background is going to be hardware and access control. So um
And championship ballroom dancing.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you guys want to learn how to ballroom dance,
You want to hear more about that, you can listen to my podcast episode with Benji as we dive deep into the world of competitive ballroom dancing.
yeah, it was the whole episode was all about.
Yeah. Awesome. I one of my favorite parts of this one too is that, like, I feel it's fun to have a conversation where to think about, and hopefully one day we do this in person, where it's just like it's like sitting in a garage or in a basement just having a conversation, right? And I think that's the intent, is for this to be casual, comfortable and interesting. For those who don't know me, I'm John Harris. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years now. And I've done a lot of different things, from end user. Started off as a security officer, and was then all the way up to security director. Then came on the other side of the business and business development, then consulting. Worked on product development, and now work in more of the strategic alliances and channel management capacity. So, got a lot of background, a lot of opinions, a lot of ideas, and I hope to share a little bit of all of that with the audience as we go through this journey. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and my name's Baer. I go as Uncle Bear on the Security Today podcast, security's favorite uncle. I've been in the industry for about 11 years. I started in locksmithing as an apprentice and then worked my way into access control, owning my own van, enterprise security, and pre-sales engineering, and a little bit of consulting. So kind of came up from the boots on the ground and the technician and the trade and education, all very high interests within my podcast and my security environment. I got the chance to meet, John and Benji actually through my podcast. So I feel like this is showing that it was all worth it, that it's paying out because I get to have good conversations and good experiences like this. And yeah, we came together and talked about something that we wanted to provide to the industry and to the professional side of it. And you're right, I don't think that there's a lot of people who just get together and just talk shop. And it's good because we have three opinionated people. It's like the professional one, the punchy one, and the polite one. I'll let you figure out who's who. But yeah, I hope we get into it, and I hope people like it. And we'll try to make sure that it's engaging on all ends. So if you want to see questions asked or see questions answered, that's what we're here to talk about. And please comment and add your opinion too, even if we don't like it.
Especially if we don't
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the format of how we're going, we each came prepared with one question to like ask each other to start the conversation. And I guess I'll kick it off with my question. And a little preface to this question is I in a former company that I worked for, I actually got in trouble for asking this question out.
Mm,
So I thought it was a good one to, to kick off
I
the
think
podcast
so.
with. So I asked the question, like, what would happen if all major manufacturers just stopped making prox technology, wiping it off of their thing? Like there might still be prox out there and, take a while to get sold through distribution. But if every major manufacturer just stopped producing prox, what would be the effect on the overall industry? And it got me really thinking, like, because if for those who don't know, prox technology has been, I don't know, 80s, early 80s when it came into the security industry. And it has been not very secure since then. It's a very clonable, very hackable credential, where basically anyone off of Amazon can buy a $19 2-day Prime cloner and skim your credential. They then own your identity. And as they're walking through your business, it shows up in your access control as that person. One of my first experiences with Prox was actually cloning a security director's badge at a university, and his eyes were blown away because he was sold that as a secure credential. And that was mind blowing to me that, some Dork was able to clone it off of him and then educate him on how different securities work within the credentials. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? What do you think would happen if we just got rid of prox?
I think first and foremost, I want to set the stage is that what we're not going to discuss is the viability or the security or the risk or the impact. Like, let's set that aside for a moment, because that's a whole discussion in and of itself of like, is it, show me an instance where a bad thing has actually happened because of somebody cloning or doing so. We're not talking about like black being on stage at, black hat or like a a hackers conference and doing it. Put all that aside. The question being asked is simply, what happens if we stop manufacturing it? And first, I want to point to, this happens in technology all the time, right? Look at Betamax versus VHS. Okay. We stopped making it because it was a sub. Well, no. Well, we can get a whole argument on whether Betamax was better than VHS. It lost the market race on being the accepted technology. So there are examples in other industries where folks said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to stop making this thing. So I want to set the stage with like that premise. So for anyone to say not possible, not feasible, I disagree. So with that laid out, I think number one is it forces the innovation to take place when it takes us off of this not just insecure, but like I think it's like it's a innovation albatross, or like lack of innovation, because it's, as long as it's out there, it stifles the ability for us to have a better experience. because the reader is the thing that was one of the things that I think is like holding back the ability for the door opening experience to be something greater and more interesting. And it allows for you know, this, let's like, I think it's holding the industry back, not just from like a security perspective, but like what else could we do with the reader? The form factor of a reader. Does the reader even have to be a reader? Could I embed it into the frame of a door so it's not even there anymore? And it's just like a part of like when I come to the door, it senses me. Do I need a reader? Can I use a camera? Could a camera sense something about me that could trigger, biometric facial recognition? Like reimagine the entire door opening experience. When I'm forced to get rid of procs, then I think you can, it opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, I think that also what you're kind of alluding to is that the innovation or advancement of reader technology might get to the place where we don't have enough time to like educate the population on 125, kilohertz versus 100 or 13.56 megahertz, and that's from like procs to high security. We don't have enough time to educate them to get rid of procs and keep 13.5 megahertz without just going to a new technology.
Mm.
So like, yes, we should get rid of procs, but will procs go away alongside high security frequency because we move to the camera or we move to geolocation on a mobile credential or something of that nature? That's an excellent. That's almost like another question. So you got like two questions in there, but I think if you just got rid of it though, it would take some balls from a couple big producers of it, and I don't think that they would do it because then there would be leverage from another company still selling it, and the education isn't high enough, so people wouldn't go to buy higher security, card readers because they think, well, it's cheaper to buy the procs, and they don't know the difference between the two. I think a lot of access control seems simple, but it's so deep. And
Mm.
so I think a lot of integrators have a hard time realizing that every single avenue of the devices that they're putting on doors and the panels that they're putting up are very deep and complex. And so I don't think a lot of them even know that there's that big of a security risk between the two.
Well, so one thing I'll maybe poke at you a little bit there, Uncle Bear, is that the question wasn't should they or will they? It's what happens if they do. So let's
Yeah.
assume that they're forced to, but you buried the lead a little bit in there. I think something that you alluded to is that it opens up entry for other technology types, other like for instance, I forget there's a company called Active Witness. uh they're based in Utah, and I'm
Hmm.
like I'm gonna kind of not give them the right justice for the product they have, but more or less it like it uses a combination of like IR detection and video and some other things, and it can like visualize door intent by the way your body is approaching. And there was another company that went out of business that did something very similar. Um, that they used a combination of like facial recognition for credentialing and kind of like your movement and the way the body moves to say you're coming to the door, therefore I'm reading you, therefore I'm opening. And so but people were like, but I got a prox reader, so why do I need that? Right. And theirs was more around like ADA application of like if I'm coming up and I'm on a wheelchair or like some other way of like picking up people's intent to come to the door so they can open it before they need it to be opened. But it got me thinking about if you remove the option of the procs and potentially like those other versions of legacy reader types, like you brought up the 1300 series of the megahertz high frequency. If you're like, well, if I'm getting rid of this, should I just refactor the whole thing? I already had that's why people get worried about the whole rip and replace discussion, because it's like, well, if I'm already taking this out and I already got to redo the wiring, why not I just put in something like all of a sudden this like, new fandangled tech startup from God knows what, who comes out with God knows what, all of a sudden gets interested in the conversation. So that's something that I think becomes more of a, we haven't seen, it's there's like three big access control reader companies, that I can think of, that probably dominate 90% of the marketplace, right? And so all of a sudden it's like maybe the Wild West when it comes to reader technology, if you're forced to, not given the option, but forced to make that switch. What do
Well, what
you
about
think,
you,
Benji?
Benji? Yeah, can't be asking questions, not answering.
John, I love how you were poking the bear there. And I think I think I agree with both of you to a certain extent. I think it would force people's hands to look at other options, but it also would open up the door for new innovation, right? Like people would have to figure out how am I going to be able to provide access control in a different way, right? Like we'll have to, it would force people to think creatively about the different solution. I mean, would it be mobile credentials? Maybe that might be the stepping stone between there and biometrics, or could it be a different technology that we're not even thinking about? How could AI get involved with this, right? Like what there's it opens up the door to a lot of possibilities and a lot of potential, but I think it would force the industry to upgrade to become better, to do better, because prox is simple, it's easy, and it's a band-aid, right? For hey, you need access, you don't want to deal with keys, here you go, here's your fob. And it's too simple. So if we eliminated the easy, it would force people to start bouldering out there and figuring out a new path, a new trailblaze. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what would happen, but maybe someday we'll get there where procs, we can hashtag kill procs.
Yeah. That would be awesome. Also, do you think that so like some of those technologies that you were talking about, another one that I think of is GeoKey,
Yeah.
which is in the MDU space, will use your geolocate, they will geolocate the site so that cellular data will show you on site and then your card will work or remote opening will work. And I wonder if there's a cheap way to somehow get an antenna on a site that would ping you, it would know right down to what door you're at. And that kind of opens the question of like, do you think that we'll get rid of the reader at some point? But maybe that's for another time. I don't know. But that was just
Or
something that,
even the reader construct of the reader as the both the antenna
mm,
and the receiving mechanism of the signal of you, right? So it's like it because as I'm thinking through this, like there's other technologies that do like Wi-Fi repeating and Bluetooth repeating throughout to try to do
mhm,
kind of like uh hacky geolocation. They have a hard time based on like find like I'm on the floor above and then I open the door under me and like that kind of stuff. Like so there's some spatial, but I think that technology is getting better and better. But the one thing that's on like every floor all over the place is typically the reader. And so if you use the reader as the form factor for that mechanism,
yeah.
that becomes interesting where it's also, pulling in the data and then receiving the information of your credentials. So did we just create a startup idea like
We
first
did.
episode, question
First
number
episode.
one?
I'll tell you
Sweet
what,
on that.
that would also help you not lose the deterrence factor of a door. Because I do
Yeah.
think that, like, if you remove the reader, sometimes it might become more of a target to the bad guy, which how many times does that happen in the wild? But we have to think that because we're in the
Yeah.
security industry. And so you don't lose the deterrence because you see the little red HID strip there, and you know that
Yeah.
that door's got higher security than just a Jimmy bar under the door or something like that.
Just a lock and key, which is a
Yeah.
great segue to our next question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
So
you
that's
so
want to
Bear,
that's right. So my first question that I decided to bring to the table was, what is the future of the locksmith? And if you've listened to my content, or I think that I've even might have even discussed this on both of your podcasts that I had you guys on the Security Today podcast, but it's something I think of often coming from seeing myself still as a locksmith by trade and hoping one day to return into, that area of work. But I just want to, I'll let you guys start. I did write a little bit of a thesis. I went a little overboard. It was like 11 at night and the bullet points just kept coming. So I'm sorry, but what do you
First,
think, John?
oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, 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 Benji too. I
There
was
you
just
go. You
pushing it
go.
along. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, locksmiths are my people. I love locksmiths. I am purposely growing out my beard to try to blend in with some black. So, it's good locksmiths are hard to find nowadays. First of all, and if you do find them, they're I put them in a couple different categories. They're up there in age. It is kind of a an older trade. Unfortunately, last time I checked in on at Aloha, the locksmith trade show, right? There were guys there with their ventilator and their oxygen tanks, and like it was scary to see where such a respected trade has,
Yeah.
and I still think there's value in locksmithing. I mean, if you think about it, you could have the best access control in the world, but if you lose network, you lose power, and you don't have battery backup. What do you do? Like you need someone to be able to get through that door, and hopefully you have a mechanical key to override that door. So, I mean, I think locksmiths have to adapt or they're going to die off. Literally, they're going to die off if they don't adapt. They've got. I find a lot of locksmiths that are really successful now are partnering with integrators, with security integrators that do access control. A lot of integrators don't want to mess with the hardware, but that's their bread and butter is the locksmiths. They love they eat, breathe, and uh sleep thinking about that hardware, right? And so if you can find the opportunity to bridge or partner with a security integrator in your area, I think there's some very good some symbiotic relationships that can happen there. If not, there's a lot of new technology that locksmiths can easily jump into that aren't really difficult to really understand from an access control perspective. So if you're not getting wires attached to your locksmithing job in some way, I think you're going to die out, unfortunately. So yeah, that was my first thought.
I think that's dead on.
Yeah, I tend to agree and this is a conversation Bear, you and I have had previously around like that. No matter what, and as much as a technology futurist that I tend to be, I don't envision a way where a lock disappears. Where there's because so we had I live in Minneapolis. We had a big storm roll through here the other day. Frontline winds, tornado warnings, electricity goes out. So if I have electrified hardware like you just talked about, Benji, then how else? Either my door is unsecure by design when the electricity is no longer there or the power is no longer there, or I'm locked in or locked out, right? Both things are bad. And so you have to have some semblance of fail safe to be able to do that. And unless I'm missing some other, I mean, there's other things you could have like the low power, no power kind of like punch key. Like there's ways, but but that's still a mechanical device that could fail. And so when you come down to it, I don't, at least I am unfamiliar with a way where some sort of mechanical override and frankly, just in any commercial environment, there are fire codes. And so you're going to be required, whether in your home you decide to, roll the die and say, I have perfect generator backup and everything's, I'm prepared to the 10th degree and don't need to worry about it. If you're operating any sort of commercial environment, no matter what, fire marshal is going to say, you got to have, doomsday scenario. I need to be able to open these doors. So accept that as reality. The opportunity, I think, is for younger people to come in and really like break into an industry that, to your point, Benji, is aging, is a specialist industry, and is something that is very is tradescraft. And so it is a science and an art. You mentioned that great locksmiths are hard to find. I used to work here when I was a security director. I did all my lock and cores with one guy that was here in the city that I live in, because he never fucked it up. And so, I mean, he would do the cores that I would then ship to other sites around the US to be installed by the local facilities guy, but I wanted him to cut all my keys and manage all my cores, because I wanted them under one single structure. And so, that matters. It is such an artisan craft, I believe. And so I see opportunity. That's where I see the future of it is. And now we have to find ways. And I think, shout out to SIA and their FAST organization, as a potential opportunity there to bring, because the electrician and kind of that side of the more sexy side of the business where I'm hanging cameras and I'm wiring and I'm configuring and all that, like that's what looks great at trade shows. But this underserviced opportunity to just come in and be like, I'm gonna start doing cores and keys, and you can make a whole business. I mean, that's where I think, like, if I'm closed circuit to the young people who might be looking for, what they want to do with their life, and frankly, for those who right now are disenchanted with maybe the educational opportunities, they don't want to go into $100,000 worth of debt, student loan, right? Go apprentice with a shop, and then, like you say, attach yourself to a couple integrators, and that's a hell of a business, right? And something that you can build, and an asset that maybe you build and over time could sell, and really have that entrepreneurial development and journey. I find myself now, as I'm articulating this, totally rethinking all my life choices and feeling like I really missed out.
No, I don't think you did.
Okay.
But I will tell you you're both dead on. And I think that you're like, even not being locksmiths, you're picking up like kind of what's going on in that industry. So just a few stats that I was able to like pull out of the locksmith market. Kentley Insights puts it at like 3.7 billion in 2024 in the United States. And they say that and these numbers are a little hard to, whittle down. So you're working within a bracket, but there's roughly like 24,500 locksmiths in the United States with about 34,000 people working for them, which, if you think about it, is really small comparatively to how much work you're talking about being out there. The Bureau of Labor Statistics puts it at like around 15,000 like actual locksmiths. So those are probably the guys with the oxygen tanks at Aloha. And you're not wrong. Like, it is an aging industry. And that's actually one of the things that has me worried about it. But I am optimistic about the future. So the industry itself is declining in people leaving it. So they think that like somewhere around like 1,500 individuals left it in a 5-year span between like 17 and 21 to 2021. But in that same 5-year span from I think it was like 19 to 23, is that 5 years? Yeah, it's gained like 2% growth, which is a bigger number because you're working in billions instead of thousands at that point. And so it really is an industry that is kind of like at this crossroads where it's losing people, but it is gaining income and revenue, because you're right, like that specialty of trade. So I said I have two paths. I have the happy path and the doomsday path for where the locksmith goes. The happy path, I said, like all trades, the trade value is going to increase, meaning that it'll become more compelling for entry, like you were talking about, John, where like you're going to see people maybe paid a little more upon entry because it's a specialized thing. And the nice thing is that when you apprentice for a locksmith, like I did, he sold me something he paid me not just in finances, but he paid me in a trade that and we mentioned this, John, on our podcast. I tell my wife all the time, like, if shit hits the fan and everything goes south, like I can crawl back into a van. Like at the end of the day, I can crawl back in there because I learned the trade. So that is a big factor for younger people coming into it that maybe don't take a more traditional path. That's like, hey, you can have something that you don't ever really have to give up. You can go pursue other things and still come back, and it's here. So I would hope that the locksmith industry realizes the position that it's in, and then shops can, start to use their repertoire to become that security company and a locksmith first company. And I know a couple guys doing this, like Will Houston out of Stice Lock in California. They're a lock shop and they've added Brevo and they've added cameras and they've added this and that. And so if locksmiths can kind of come to be more open-hearted, because what you get is these codgers that I don't want to touch that. I've spent 50 years in this and I'm not going to get on the computer and I can barely send an email. So they need to get the younger generation in there to kind of help them assist in that. And then I think that it can become like, if locksmiths can do that, or if they can partner, like you were saying, that's a really good option too. Then it's kind of this like, it kind of helps the whole industry out, because then the GC almost has like this single point of contact. They don't have to call a door company and a locksmith to, change the mortar cylinder and the security company to hang the mag. Like they can really go funnel down to like one point, and pumping that lifeblood into the trade maybe will like squelch the exodus and kind of bring it back into an important thing. Now, from the doomsday point of view, I do fear that the locksmith will like go away. And the reason that I fear that is because of things like our rip and replace culture. So like, oh, it's not working anymore, or oh, that crash bar isn't working. Well, just call the door company, get an RMA it, get a new one. And then they don't even realize that there's a guy down the shop or down the street sitting in a shop that could come out and literally put like 20 years of life into that door by changing a bracket or changing a solenoid or changing something within, the crash bar or the vertical rods or something like that. And so I fear that that will cause the industry to forget about the locksmith, because another thing is like people my age I talk to about locksmith and they're like, oh yeah, like getting into cars, or like if you're locked out. And it's like, okay, yes, but I feel like my grandfather, when he was like, oh, I need a new key, he was like, I should go to the locksmith. But
Yeah.
now they're like, oh, I need a new key, I guess I'll buy a new set from Home Depot,
Right.
or I'll use that chintzy key machine in
Yeah.
Walmart's, vestibule. So I worry about it. But I am hopeful that the more attention that can come to it, maybe that's why I made it my first question, can just kind of like reinvigorate that and pump life into it.
Oh man, there's so many good points there. I think that the one thing you brought up, that it's kind of the risk and opportunity are so interesting, and like you know oppositional forces of, so if you believe the market size of not just the lock industry at roughly 3 billion, but which I think is undersized, because that probably, I subscribe to the bigger, having done market exercises around access control, that it's closer to like a $90 billion. So if you believe that, then I think that hardware one is probably closer to a 10 to 20 billion dollar
Mm.
industry. And so just reinforcing that large opportunity, because I think it doesn't conceptualize, just think about everywhere locks go, right? So like,
Yeah.
so I think usually it's segmented where it's only paying attention, because like I did an exercise on just the supply chain access control marketplace, looking at storage facilities alone. Think about that. Think about how many locks are in a storage facility, and how many of those fucking things you see popping up all over the place, because we can't throw things away. We hoard more shit, and then we buy a place to store stuff that we don't even use, and there's a lock that goes on it. So like, and then I lose the key to that, and then I cut it instead of getting a locksmith, right? So your whole point. So big opportunity there. Also, the technology that we talked about around like access control, um, there's so many more opportunities to say, I'm going to become an expert in maybe this like SMB access controller video that's very easy to install, that's very simple, or that I can hire a couple, younger individuals if I'm more older in my career, and say, how to grab your laptop and go configure all this, and it's very easy, and it's as plug and play as that can be. And so you can align yourself with other companies that make it easy to use their stuff, so that you can be a locksmith who also becomes kind of a a little boutique integrator who only works in like a segment where it says, I'm the best locksmith and integrator for strip malls in Omaha, right? And like that's what I do, right? And so just like we've all agreed that like great locksmiths are hard to find. Like sometimes great integrators are hard to find. So if you're already known to be an artisan craftsman, you're probably going to take that same, you're going to build a business around taking that same intentionality and that same focus on quality around whatever you do, which is only going to be good. And you can obviously say you can take more of that pie where it's like before I'm just doing the locks, but now I can do your locks and your access control, maybe toss some cameras up and make it easy for you. The flip side of that, like you said, is the our rip and replace, or even I didn't think of this before, but I've seen fully like pre-configured door sets where
Mhm.
a full door with a lock and everything just gets sent to the site and everything is pre-configured and pre-done from a shop where it's all done. So, you know, I didn't think about this when we had our conversation, but is there a world where I'm doing 3D printing of door hardware? And where it's like all taken care of. Now things still break, still things need to get reconfigured. There's still somebody out there having to touch that door in some form or fashion and fix things. But you know, that's where just to like, hey, get it out there and put a new one in. And I don't care if I create all these like bastard door hardware that doesn't have where I'm managing a billion keys now because I didn't just go and get an expert to go fix my situation. You know, that is the the other side of that risk is that if we don't get ahead of it, then the industry just and the end user reacts in a way of just like impatience. What do they know? It's just like get, you know, fix this thing, fix it right now, and just move on, and don't think of like the third and fourth order magnitude of doing it
Mm.
in that kind of impatient way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I also think that you bring up a like what you just hit on right there at the end is that locksmith expanding in strategically adding some sort of electronic security and like Benji was saying, or finding that partnership and just becoming that value add to somebody else, but you all you have to do is show up and do the work. Because that's a lot of locksmiths out there, man. They're like, well, I'm just gonna fix the door. Like, you know, okay, well then find that person that is doing the whole kit and caboodle of security and they just need a door, you know, a locksmith, which I will say this too for access integrators going the other way, though it might get a little more difficult getting into like keying systems or, you know, small format, large format IC cores, all that stuff. Like door hardware needs to be on your bucket list. You got to know how to set a closer and or hang a closer or fix a hinge or shim a hinge because you're putting security on a door. Like
Yeah.
you can put all the security in the world and then that shit drags and it doesn't end up closing. And that's how I get into my apartment pool, like when I forget my keys. You know what I'm saying? So you got to know both ways. We are all security experts, you know?
Yeah, and Bear, I think you touched a little bit on that as well. Not only is there opportunity for locksmiths to partner with integrators, but I've seen integrators actually go out and just buy lock shops and
Yeah.
be like, hey, you're part of us now. We need to work together. Like, hey, you are our hardware person. And
Yeah.
or they'll hire a hardware guy, like someone that just only does their hardware because integrators hate messing with hardware, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's opportunity at both ends. So
Which I'll tell you, that's a great way to take care of the locksmith industry too, because part of my worry is that these older generation locksmiths, they just put 40 years into a trade and they're coming out of it with like, yeah, maybe it's worth 150K because it's not a ton of assets, but they've serviced the community for how many years? And so if integrators can step in and help those specific individuals out by like purchasing their company, working it off terms, they maybe get to still, you know, work with the company or contract through it. Like it's taking care a little bit of that generation. So definitely.
Such a great, such, all great points. I think one thing we can agree on is we don't feel like the need for it isn't going anywhere.
Hmm.
And so, let's hope that either the locksmith industry, kind of sub industry at large, figures out a way to continue to thrive and take advantage of what's there, and or the collective realizes that that's a part that we just can't let disappear. That skill set is it's necessary, right? It's not going to go away like the procs might. All right. Last,
Like we hope.
last, yeah. So my question, final question for us today is, when does access control become middleware? And let me get some context around this. And so, I'm talking about the access control system, the software of access control, and so when do we get to a world where that is no longer the primary user experience or operational layer? It's just an insignificant piece of middleware that's squished in between other things. And so I'll kind of leave it ambiguous like that, and maybe Benji give you the first crack at an opinion on it.
Yeah, I think how do I want to phrase this? I think there's companies that are already doing that. I think if they're looking at access control as just one more way to get data to define what the user experience looks like. And I think companies that are just utilizing what they can pull from access control to improve that end user's experience, in a way, it's middleware, right? Like they're collecting all this information and then enhancing the user experience in some way or another. And I think that's where the industry is trending towards. Like, yeah, it's nice to have access control and feel safe and secure at your place of work or at your home. But like, what's the next level? What's the natural evolution of access control? And I think it's heading that direction. If not, there's already companies that are utilizing access control as just one part of their whole ecosystem to affect the overall experience. And if you're talking about market size, right? That's just one slice of the pie that potentially could be much bigger. And if companies are seeing the value in the data that you're able to pull from access control, I think it could happen overnight. Like, what if Google, I mean, what if Amazon comes in and like, hey, how can I use this small, tiny little access control company, what we think is like a huge access control company, that in their minds, oh, we'll just use this as one piece of our whole experience.
Mm.
And boom, overnight it becomes middleware.
Yeah, great points. Bear, what are your thoughts?
So you're saying like, why can't it just live in your Office 365? Like, why can't I just like have experience in my workday where it's just seamlessly integrated, that it's just this piece that I plugged into my Windows environment?
Or so I'll my idea is that really the holistic mechanism of access control system has multiple layers to it, and there's the user experience layer at the door opening experience, right? And then that generates data, and then there's the operational management layer where I'm looking at the information, and that could be alerts, alarms, data, metrics, right? Um, and then the in between is just the data going back and forth and the experience that happens in between. Now, today, typical access control systems are trying to do all of that, right? It's the reader and the software at the edge to the panel to the server. Then they're doing monitoring in your security operations center, and they're doing visitor management, and they're doing guard management, and trying to do all of that. And my thesis or hypothesis is that the traditional access control just actually gets squished down into the middle, because there's companies who specialize in a great user experience at the door with like look at like a Swift Connect, where it's like it's all about how the door opens, how the identity is managed, how the credential happens. So that identity and user experience layer. And then there's that other layer on top of that, where it's that operational layer where security operation systems or, PSIMs and that kind. And so when does that traditional access control just get put in the middle where it's no longer relevant because the other experience layers are just software that can be added on both sides and can be agnostic to what type of access control system you have. So all of a sudden, the whole we need to rip and replace and have one unified system is irrelevant because I'm going to slap my operational layer on top. I'm going to put my identity and experience layer on the front, and then whatever's in between no longer matters.
Hmm. Do you feel
And that
like
could be Microsoft, right? That could be the fact that it's like, and I just chunk it all into an Azure environment and I run it through Workday, and that's the identity credentialing, and everyone's got O65, and like that's it. Right. And so like we're like teetering around the edge. And Benji, you alluded to it. It's not an if, it's a when. Amazon, Apple, Google, they all kind of play in the space a little bit, right? They all have, they're testing the waters. This is my idea, right? They're testing the waters in the home security space. You can get a Ring, you can get door hardware from Google subsidiaries, Amazon. Like they're I think firing bullets until the cannonballs come in. That's just my like technology conspiracy theorist hat that my tinfoil hat over here I'll put on around. It's an eventuality in my opinion.
it's the ever swallowing widened mouth of
Yeah.
every industry will fall in at one point. No, but so do you think that that is something that can gain traction quickly into the future in enterprise security, where you have multiple locations and security across national or international becomes like a more, what should I say, like a not more important but like a more poignant factor, that like now we have a SOC and now we have this because we're this big of an industry and I need a experience from my SOC team or my GSOC to be able to experience all these locations at the door, all that data. I kind of need it sectioned off so that I know what I'm looking at. Because if we just put it as middleware in our environment, it would maybe get a little lost. You feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, because I think that the constraint is the idea that the access control system that I'm using all has to be the same, right? And so now by design, they've done it so like if you take take the top 5 access control systems and put them all next to each other, they all do the same thing, but they speak a different language. And so the challenge today is that one gets an alert that says door ajar. The other one calls it door forced. The other
Mm.
one calls it open door, right? Same thing, but their language is different. So the unification mechanism of pulling that into a single activity is challenging because I have to have some sort of translation methodology. Now, today, because of things like my pals over at Stratasoft with their Rex AI, that's a shot across the bow of how we'll be able to use machine learning and technology to be that translation layer, where today you're having to do point by point translation, integration, and configuration. And so I think when that enterprise or like another might be a commercial real estate portfolio management company. Say I buy up all these, and then usually I got to go rip them all out and I'm going to put like Salto everywhere. Salto's a great product, would love to put it everywhere, but what if you didn't have to? And you say, I don't need to change it because all I want for my SOC is visibility and the ability to do certain things. And then I want my user experience at the front layer, but with mobile credentialing, and now the Apple Wallet is opened up, I can just use mobile. I can buy HID mobile credentials and give them out to everybody. And then I can buy some other system and put it over the top and have that. And then the access control, it's in the middle. As long as it's opening and closing doors and giving me the data that I need, I don't care what it is. Now, so time horizon, Bear, I don't know, right? Like that's a momentous shift in ideological adjustment of like I need it all to be X product because I need it to all work the same and connect and do that. So that's the yesterday and today. That's why I think when I like the question being, when does this occur? Um, I think to answer my own question, I don't know if it ever occurs because of the, I also think the market size of that enterprise, while it leads the technology momentum, it's small. Like Fortune 500 companies that actually deploy at scale enterprise security technology programs is the minority. Majority of them are like, as long as my door, I mean, that's the whole, why is Proc still there? Why are they lazy about changing door hardware? If it's working, we don't give a shit. Right. So, that's why we have cameras that are 14, 15 years old. I change my laptop every 2 years. I get a new cell phone every year and a half, but the same reader, insecure reader, is on the door. As long as it turns green when I run my credential, I don't care about it. So, but anyway, I went on a diatribe without answering your question directly, but that's where my head goes around the context of where that fits in.
Yeah.
I think as access control systems become more cloud-based,
Mm,
transition is going to be so much easier for someone to do something like that, because as
that's fair.
guys are opening up and the technology of integrations streamlines, there could be a company that does, I don't care what access control you got. This is what I've got to offer you. Here's this operational data. Here's the user experience. I mean, you're wow, I'm getting like chills kind of thinking about like someone could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Really,
and then then you're just connecting to a series of cloud instances versus having to go in and physically touch all your on-site serve. So I think you're right. When cloud becomes the more prevalent, and that's an interesting point, is that while typical enterprise high security still lags in cloud adoption, again, I'll propose that they're the smaller part of the segment, though the logos get more attention because they're sexy. The long tail is way more likely to use a cloud system because they're like, hey, I got 20 doors and 10 cameras. Like, give me an acre, legacy Phoenix system. Give me a Brevo, give me, PDK, give me something that I can just plug in and go and configure, that I can get my great locksmith to come and learn to do. Right. So like, that's where that could, I think you're onto something, Benji. That's where yeah, full circle. See how we connect it all together, guys? It's organic.
Yeah. And I've heard you mention that before, John, that you could, I mean, essentially you could go out, it doesn't matter what you have on the site, or the company that your company just purchased can just go in and maybe drop just like a Raspberry Pi on a network,
Yeah.
collect all the stuff that was already being collected from your browser, and just throw it into something where Rex AI can come in and say, hey, this is your data set.
Yeah.
And I feel like what that's doing is, instead of, for a long time in the security industry, we've been, and this is funny because I was just thinking about this the other day, where is single pane of glass really like the peak of integration? Or do we need that at all for integration to be at its peak? And
Mm.
so for a long time, the security industry has been trying to like fuse these canyon rims of like, put all of it together so that it, like Pangea or like meshes
Yeah.
together or whatnot. But it's like, instead of coming in and being like, oh, look at all these canyons, I've got something that will just fill the gap. I'll just
Yeah.
pour water into them, and now
Yeah.
it's like one thing
Yeah.
across the top of it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
good question.
just the val, that's such a good, because like there's a there's a couple of buzz terms or buzzwords that like won't die, and single pane of glass is one of them. You know, fusion and like convergence, like the things that mean everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah,
And so we'll have like a conversion, fusion, single pane of glass, that unified system. All that shit that means nothing. But it's such a good point. It's like, what do you really like? And that's where this is interesting to me, of like, what if I could just give you the data you cared about when you cared about it, about the things that matter to you, and if it was just like, look, and that's what's interesting when I work with big enterprise companies that are trying to just like do data exercises or metrics. They're like, they can't get anything meaningful because it's like, it's almost like it's buried under you'd have to mine it out of your access control system to actually do something with it, because none of them were built with metrics or data in mind. They were just built to open and close doors and do a bunch of point solution stuff like anti-passback and like automated lockdowns and things that matter in certain instances, in certain situations at scale, and for like everyday activity, aren't necessarily useful for a broad amount of the user base.
If we didn't just give the comment section like 40 trailheads to go ahead and share your opinion.
I hope
Yeah,
so.
me too.
All right. Well, that was question number 3, guys. So
There
our
it
3
is.
questions were,
Talkin
we
Shop.
talked about major manufacturers not using procs. We talked about the future of the locksmith, and then access control becoming middleware.
And somehow we didn't script it. Somehow it all came back together.
Yeah,
It's
we
all
should note that
meshed.
we individually pulled these questions with little to no coordination and somehow tied it all together, which I think is just a tremendous attribute to our natural charisma, and
And good
ability
looks.
to just
Oh, wait.
great looks.
Yeah. Well,
All right,
cool.
Benji, let's wrap up here, man. Take us home.
Okay. Well, I think we can expect to have an episode drop each month. And thank you everyone for joining us and watching. Make sure you are liking and subscribing. This episode is presented to you by Apex Performance. So make sure that you are following our journey. But I'm sure we'll see you on the next episode, okay?
All right.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. Thank
Thanks.
you very much.